People are fighting every day to survive and can't even obtain a meal. This red cup comes from Rwanda, from a child named Fabian, and I carry this around as a symbol really of the challenge and also the hope, because 1 cup of food a day changes Fabian's life completely. But what I'd like to talk about today is the fact that this morning, about 1 billion people on Earth, or 1 out of every 7, woke up and didn't even know how to fill this cup. 1 out of every 7 people.
Hunger, desperation, fatigue, and frustration have engulfed Somalia. Millions are left scrambling for food and water under the scorching sun in this inhospitable dust bowl. A full-blown catastrophe. This is what it looks like.
I've never experienced that sort of hunger. In Niger, 1/4 of all children die before they reach 5. If hunger doesn't kill them, we call it malnutrition, and it can damage kids for life.
I'm Katrina LeMay Doan. Behind me is a very poor village in Africa. And this is Sophia. She's 8 years old and life is very hard for her. Children here struggle just to stay alive. It's a place where there's a lot of disease. And even though you see these pictures and know that it's happening, many of you won't do anything to help.
Picture for a moment a little girl or a boy who doesn't know what it's like to just be a child. When we met him, 12-year-old Alex had just watched both of his parents die. The only family he has now is a very old grandmother and 4 little brothers. Alex has become mother and father to these children. Imagine.
We've all seen the shocking pictures coming from East Africa, where thousands face starvation and sickness. Wherever hunger strikes, it is the children who are suffering the most. That's why ActionAid has launched its most urgent appeal ever for child sponsors. Right now, we have over 5,000 children in Africa who urgently need UK sponsors. Children forced to scavenge for food, who survive on just 1 bowl of maize a day. Please sponsor a child in Africa right now by calling 0800 482 400.
The Horn of Africa is experiencing the worst drought now that it has seen in nearly 60 years. We are seeing livestock dying by the thousands. We are seeing young children who are severely malnourished, who are dying. We are seeing people who are fleeing from their homes, trying to find food, water, and security.
To be honest, there's hunger in our community.
Yes, there is food in the market, but the problem, there is no money to buy
right food. To food, access to food is also a constitutional right according to the South African.
The future of our towns and our villages and our farms depend on a community that is healthy.
South Africa, a food-secure nation, producing enough calories to adequately feed its 52 million people. However, 1 in 4 people live in hunger, and more than half of all South Africans face the risk of hunger.
All the coffee from this area goes to the Western world for consumption. There is no coffee which is as quality as this coffee, but we are getting very low price.
Of particular importance to Africa is agriculture. Around 75% of the population in developing countries live in rural areas, and the vast majority of those are dependent on agriculture for their livelihood. This calls for substantial improvements in market access for African agricultural products. Only a review of existing export subsidies and other punitive, trade-distorting support to farmers in developed countries can make this possible for Africa, but there are no indications that this could be anywhere near on the horizon. In this day and age of liberalization and globalization, isn't it ironic that various tariff and non-tariff barriers like import bans, product-specific quotas and rules of origin are still being used to curtail Africa's access to lucrative markets abroad?
Africa is always looking to boost her internal and external trade. Domestically, intra-Africa trade is slowly driving up the figures, but Africa's real trade problems lie abroad. Tariff and non-tariff barriers are still effectively being used to limit Africa's access to lucrative markets. So the change of guard at the World Trade Organization is of particular significance to the continent. But will the election of Brazilian Roberto Azevedo as the World Trade Organization Director General signal a change in policy towards Africa, or will it just be business as usual? Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff said of the election that Azevedo was chosen with the aim of creating a more dynamic and fair world economic. Is there an expectation, though, that there will be a shift in approach at the WTO?
Yeah, given the position Brazil has always taken on major issues at WTO, we definitely do expect a shift. But as the ambassador has said, we must always bear in mind that this is a member-driven organization, and some members are more powerful than others, and therefore Africa still has to play its part. Other developing countries must put their act together. We must be able to identify what are our offensive interests, what are our defensive interests, and what we do hope is that Mr. Azevedo will not lean too much towards powerful countries, because even within developing countries, we are not equal.
What is Africa's share of the global trade market, though, still remains very low at something about 3%. Why is this?
Well, I think one is because we have been seen by the rest of the world as a source of raw materials. And time has come, and I think our president made that point. We should add value to our products. Because when we are selling these products as raw materials, we are also exporting jobs to the country where we are exporting our tea in bulk, our coffee, which is not roasted. We're exporting both the raw materials and the jobs. We need to retain those jobs here by adding value and creating jobs and ensuring that our youth, our unemployed, get jobs. And that's the only way we can industrialize.
In terms of the impact, long-term as well as short-term, it frames the continent as unchanging and as a continent that's in need of help, Western help.
Traditional OECD donors provide around $130 billion a year in public development aid, but 7 times as much now flows in as things like foreign direct investment, bank loans, and private philanthropy. Today, official development assistance, or ODA, is tracked using criteria set decades ago by a group of OECD members that at the time comprised the world's major donors.
The G8 summit proposes that the solution to Africa's problems should be a massive increase in aid, something akin to the Marshall Plan. Unfortunately, I personally do not believe in the Marshall Plan. One, because the benefits of the Marshall Plan have been overstated. Its largest recipients were Germany and France, and it was only 2.5% of their GDP. An average African country receives foreign aid to the tune of 15% of its GDP, and that is an unprecedented transfer of financial resources from rich countries to poor countries. By displaying despair, helplessness, and hopelessness, the media is telling the truth about Africa and nothing but the truth. However, the media is not telling us the whole truth, because despair, civil war, hunger, and famine, although they are part and parcel of our African reality, they are not the only reality, and secondly, they are the smallest reality. Africa has immense opportunities that never navigate through the web of despair and helplessness that the Western media largely presents to its audience. But the effect of that presentation is it appeals to sympathy, it appeals to pity, it appeals to something called charity. And as a consequence, the Western view of Africa's economic dilemma is framed wrongly. The wrong framing is a product of thinking that Africa is a place of despair. What should we do with it? We should give food to the hungry. We should deliver medicines to those who are ill. We should send peacekeeping troops to serve those who are facing a civil war. And in the process, Africa has been stripped of self-initiative. I want to say that it is important to recognize that Africa has fundamental weaknesses, but equally it has opportunities and a lot of potential. We need to reframe the challenge that is facing Africa from a challenge of despair which is called poverty reduction, to a challenge of hope. We frame it as a challenge of hope, and that is wealth creation. The challenge facing all those who are interested in Africa is not a challenge of reducing poverty, it should be a challenge of creating wealth. Once we change those two things, if you say the Africans are poor and they need poverty reduction, you have the international cartel of good intentions moving onto the continent with what? Medicines for the poor, food relief for those who are hungry, and peacekeepers for those who are facing civil war. And in the process, none of these things is really productive, because you are treating the symptoms, not the causes of Africa's fundamental problems. Sending somebody to school and giving them medicines, ladies and gentlemen, does not create wealth for them. Wealth is a function of income, and income comes from you finding a profitable trading opportunity or a well-paying job.
I think when you perpetuate these systems of the framing of Africa as unchanging and as needing assistance from the West, without recognizing that there have been changes, fundamental changes in the past 30 years, then you ultimately lose the essence of this fight against the virus.
But you've seen what's happening in Liberia. Sarah says Ebola is a crisis. People are dying now because the disease is ravaging through certain areas of the population. Surely they deserve an opportunity to live. If we can help, we should.
Absolutely, but Band-Aid is just that. It's an apt phrase in the sense that it puts short fixes on structural changes that need to take place. So if we really want to assist, then change the WTO trade rules that adversely affect the continent. Change the neoliberal policies of the World Bank and the IMF that adversely impact the continent in terms of its economic makeup. I think those are the structural changes that need to take place, not a song that's going to raise money. And we don't even know where the money is going. Okay.
What is the international aid community doing to Africa today? They are throwing large sums of money for primary health, for primary education, for food relief. The entire continent has been turned into a place of despair in need of charity. Ladies and gentlemen, can any one of you tell me a neighbor, a friend, a relative that you know who grew well, who became rich by receiving charity, by holding the begging bowl and receiving alms? Does any one of you in the audience have that person? Does any one of you know a country that developed because of the generosity and kindness of another? Well, since I'm not seeing the hand, it appears that what I'm stating is true. External actors can only present you an opportunity. The ability to utilize that opportunity and turn it into an advantage depends on your internal capacity. Africa has received many opportunities. Many of them we haven't benefited much. Why? Because we lack the internal institutional framework and policy framework that can make it possible for us to benefit from our external relations.
No, it's not Africa. It's Liberia, Guinea, and Sierra Leone. That's the first thing.
Are they not in Africa?
Yes, but Africa is a 54-country continent. It's not a monolith.
So you don't care about those countries that are suffering?
I'm Liberian. Of course I care about those countries.
And what would you
care about my family.
me to do? What would you like
I would like you to advocate for structural changes.
So go out there with a poster.
Precisely.
And not pay money.
Change the policies of the UK government. That is how you make a change in terms
of... Not send a clinic, not send doctors, not send nurses.
Liberians, Guineans, and Sierra Leoneans are already doing that. Liberians, Guineans, and Sierra Leoneans in the UK are doing that.
So we only care about...
It's a form of completely invalidating those efforts. And I have a fundamental problem with that as a Liberian citizen. Well, we need to change that.
Oh, yes. Let's not ask the Brits to send millions of pounds to help your country and other African countries.
My country doesn't need saving. My country doesn't need saving.
And the dying people...
But there are people on the front lines, Liberians, Guineans, and Sierra Leoneans on the front lines, who are containing and fighting this disease.
So you want them to die?
No, that's not what I'm saying.
You want them to die for the right political reasons.
That's not what I'm saying. Structural changes need to happen.
All right.
That's the bottom line.